kept saying to myself, this is the whole point.
Yeah.
This is the whole point. You didn't come here to feel comfortable.
Dave Gallagher.
My name is Dave Gallagher. I'm a cognitive psychologist by training, helping people become more adventurous, to embrace adventure, to embrace challenge, to get the positives out of that.
What drives you to do these things?
It's helped my own grief and bereavement journey and mental health journey. I think when you've been at a really low point, just waking up and, washing your hair is an achievement.
Yeah.
It's part of being a survivor of
Right.
suicide. 50 kilometers a day, over 5 days, carrying all your kit, carrying all your food.
It's tough.
They give you a bit of water, 3,000 meters altitude, suddenly going into minus 25, all your own stuff, don't know anything, no idea what's going to happen.
10,000 meters elevation, 200 kilometers in 5 days.
Extreme stress is a real interest of mine. Bring research insights from cutting edge science research to bear on helping people perform better.
With adventure, it's more about just being there, like being on the journey. It's not about so that you can come back and say, I climbed.
Hello and welcome back to Rocket Pod. On today's show, we're joined by Dave Gallagher and Henk Kroon.
Dave is an adventure psychologist and Henk is a mountaineer and extreme sports enthusiast.
The reason we paired them together is that Henk keeps pushing himself to breaking point, and we're kind of curious to know what drives Henk. And Dave spends his life
Doing that.
measuring brainwaves on base jumpers and just has a better understanding of why people push themselves to the limits. This is a bit of an experiment for Rocket Pod. We're bringing two guests together so they can kind of rip off each other. So we're very excited to get stuck in today and just see what happens.
Welcome, Dave and Henk.
Welcome, Dave and Henk.
Hi.
Thank you.
Welcome to Rocket Pod. How's it going?
Great, thanks. Yeah.
So I think we just chatted a minute ago about, obviously we'll do the formal introductions in a sec, but there's basically three types of listener that Rocket Pod has kind of identified. And I guess you, the listeners, can kind of decide, which category you fit into. We've got the dreamers, kind of just consuming online. So, heavily into social media and, I know that it's part of everyone's life now, but kind of totally consumed. And then there's the listener that they have that aha moment that whatever they're doing in their life isn't really serving them. So they have a light bulb moment, and they're watching podcasts like this one to kind of really learn from folks like from Dave and Henk, and to kind of maybe improve their lives in some way, whatever that is, whether it's a fitness goal or starting a business. And then you've got the other level of listener, which is that they're actually doing it. So they're either they've started their business, they know they've got a very firm purpose. Or they've got a goal that they're looking to achieve. And I think what's exciting about today, this is really about just following on from our interview with Neil. It's developing that adventure mindset. That's Neil Lawton, who we interviewed recently. I think folks probably need to have a bit more fun in their lives. And Dave, perhaps you can talk a bit about your background as an adventure psychologist and looking at the brain and seeing what happens to the brain when we're actually doing these adventurous things, and why we should do those things. And then Henk over there has just come back from Dalab.
Dablam.
Dablab. I knew I was going to get that wrong.
It is a mouthful.
And actually, just hiked nearly 7,000 meters and got back a few days ago. So it's a chance for. It's like, why do these extreme things? I mean, you can take it to the next level. So welcome both. So Dave, why don't you kick off with what you're about, because you have an interesting background. And why should people, for those listeners that have never heard of Dave Gallagher, is that how you pronounce your name?
That is how you
Yeah, fantastic. I got that right.
Thank you.
Who is Dave? Why are you here? What message have you got to?
Yeah, sure.
What are you doing right now?
Sure. So my name is Dave Gallagher, but I also call myself the Cognitive Explorer. So that is my handle.
I like that.
And that's a juxtaposition of two things. It's the kind of the exploration, the adventure side, but it's the kind of mind, the psychology, and the cognition. Because actually, I'm a cognitive psychologist by training.
Okay, that's the official term.
That's what
okay.
I've had a research career for quite a long time, looking at the brain, looking at how we perceive the world and how we act and how we can do that in a positive way. So my Cognitive Explorer kind of brand, if you like, is all about helping people become more adventurous, to embrace adventure, to embrace challenge, to get the positives out of that. And it's such an interesting span of interests within that, because it's not just the mental health side, it's the how do we perform to our best in kind of quite stressful situations. So, extreme stress is a real interest of mine from a research point of view. So I study the brain, I do some coaching, I'm a mountain leader, I've done a whole raft of different kind of crazy things. Some people call me Crazy Dave, if they know.
That's how you're really known, isn't it? Crazy Dave. We've got crazy Dave in the room. That's great.
Well, sometimes they call me Dangerous Dave, and I actually went on a stag do in, believe it or not, Western Australia, and I've got the T-shirt which says Dangerous Dave, and I won't tell you what I got up to there. But basically, yeah. So I have a raft of experiences doing things around the world. I'll get into that in due course, but I'm primarily about understanding what makes people tick in adventurous situations.
That is perfect.
And then to bring research insights from cutting edge science research to bear on helping people perform better, helping people embrace the well-being side of taking risks in a safe way, but in a kind of progressive way, and having that kind of challenge mindset. So I'll unpack a lot of that as we go on.
Okay, that's really good. That's really good. I mean, actually, and the fact that most researchers I've met are researchers, you're actually out there doing it as well. It's actually a good segue. So Henk, Henk and I are cousins, aren't we?
We are cousins.
We are. Is it second cousin once removed, or what is the?
I think it is.
It's something like that.
But you're my mum's cousin's son.
Your mom's son. So yeah, basically.
So I think that is second cousin once removed.
Yeah. So Henk and I got chatting at those family reunions that everyone looks forward to. And Henk was telling me a bit about what he was up to, and maybe I'll let you kind of elaborate a bit about your journey, but some of the why you're here. And I think recently Henk has done some very adventurous things and pushed himself to literally breaking point. And I'm just curious to know, maybe Dave can help unpick this. What drives you to do these things, and why should people try new things? So Henk, over to you. Got the floor.
I mean, I can start a little bit from maybe like the last sort of 3 years of how it's all kind of come to this point now. So, when I'd never really had an inkling to do any sort of traveling or anything. I'd always enjoyed sport. I did rowing at school and university, and then got into running when I was a graduate because it's just, much more flexible. You can do it anytime. Yeah. But then when the pandemic hit, and I guess a few months in, we had some pretty horrific family circumstances, and my dad took his own life in the summer of 2020, and then the following year, my mum got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and then passed away almost a year ago last week. And so that whole set of circumstances has kind of inspired this move to seek adventure, to step out of maybe stepping out of the comforts of day-to-day life in I'm not going to say a controlled environment, because going to the mountains is not controlled. It's actually complete chaos. But it is about that almost that
controlled chaos.
Yeah, controlled chaos. and voluntary stress. And I've personally have really felt that it's helped my own grief and bereavement journey and mental health journey. So so a couple of the things which I've done. So I did there's an organization which organizes these multi-day self-sufficient ultra marathons, which is effectively about it roughly averages out to 50 kilometers a day over 5 days, carrying all your kit, carrying all your food,
That's tough.
They give you a bit of water.
They do. Oh, that's
but
nice of them.
that's sort of it. And I did that in Arctic Sweden, and then this summer I went to Kyrgyzstan in the mountains there, completely untouched environment. It's absolutely beautiful. And then I've just come back from Nepal. So that's
Amma
Dablam. Amma Dablam.
Amma Dablam.
Yeah, which means mother's necklace in Nepalese.
Oh, that's really nice.
Which I think is, yes, it's got I mean, the mountain itself is absolutely beautiful, and yes, it's got the mother in the middle and then the necklace around the side.
And your time in Kazakhstan, was it 10,000 meters elevation, 200 kilometers in 5 days?
Yeah,
with all your kit. I mean, that's that's incredibly intense.
It was
the fact that you can actually get through it physically. I mean, it's
just about. So we were at 3,000 meters altitude, and we were going doing 2,000 meters elevation each day. I did no acclimatization for it whatsoever, and it really showed, and it really put me in the well a few times. But we can get on to that.
And you've done all three of them like recently.
I did the Kyrgyzstan and Nepal just now, the last few months, and then I did Sweden last year. Yeah.
And what have you learned? I mean, obviously this is very fresh. What have you learned about yourself in this? You're putting yourself into these extreme situations, physically demanding, exhausting situations. Can you talk a bit about that? I
think it's about what I feel like I've learned, and I came back from this most recent trip feeling so refreshed and good and empowered.
Okay.
And I think it's getting comfortable being scared and overwhelmed. I think for me is kind of what it's all about. And I kept, every time I was thinking, I really don't want to go up. I'm really anxious, worried. What if I slip? You think of what if I'm not thinking straight and I don't clip in to the rope or whatever it is? What if I don't bring the right things, etc., etc.? But actually, but I kept saying to myself, this is the whole point.
Yeah.
This is the whole point. You didn't come here to feel comfortable and within your lane. That would just be completely against the whole reason why you came. So I kept saying to myself, this is why you came.
Yeah.
This is why you came. You came to feel fear. You came to feel overwhelmed. You came to feel out of your depth. And so when I'm thinking about, what I'm going to do, not just maybe adventure-wise, but just with my life in general, I'm trying to think like now when I'm planning, trying to embody that same feeling of look for things where you are, overwhelmed, because that's going to give you
juice
a lot. That's going to give
agency,
you juice and agency, some life horsepower. So I think that's a huge thing, because I felt that for each of these events. I mean, the Sweden one, I'd never done anything like that before. I mean, I'd done okay, maybe you could argue that maybe running 100k the year before was similar, but it's equally, that's a one-day thing. It's in the UK. It's in a temperate climate. You're not suddenly going into -25, all your own stuff, don't know anything, carrying a heavy bag, wearing snowshoes. You have no idea what's going to happen. And I remember we were about to get picked up because we were already in some very remote place called Gallagher. And then they were going to drive us another 6-7 hours into the middle of literally nowhere. And everyone there has done multiple of these things before. Everyone's there just talking, everyone's talking shop, just being like, oh yeah, I remember when I did the Marathon des Sables. I did this, I did Everest. And I was just there. I was, 25 years old, just thinking, I've bitten off way more than I can chew. like did not speak to anyone, ran up to my room, just
what have I done?
Head in the ground, like going. Yeah, just properly hyperventilating,
Really?
anxiety.
Really? That
anxiety
hit you that bad?
It
Wow.
was.
It just dawned on you what
It
you've
was
done.
scary, James. It was a scary thing you're about to do. Send you out into the wilderness.
Yeah. But it turned out all right.
But it turned out all right. It turned out really good. The event went fantastically well, and yeah, it's just I think again, the other thing I've learned is when you're overwhelmed like that. But when you're on the start line and when they say go, I don't know if I've learned this or I don't know if it was conscious, but when I think back on it, it's you shrink down this enormous task into just steps.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time counting to 10.
Okay.
For hours. It was just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay.
You did it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Yeah.
Is that something you've done in the past in endurance type of things where you really had to dig deep and just chunk it? Is that
Do you mean the counting? Yeah. When we rode, we talked about this. But I mean, the longest we would ever race was maybe 15, 17 minutes, which actually at the time seemed like a really long time. But yeah, we would talk about when you're in the well counting strokes, you'd be counting to 5 or 10 or whatever it is. And yeah, I think it's it might be something to do with reconnecting with your breath as well, and just having that. Would you call it a metronomic or?
They're probably
an internal timekeeper type of thing.
Yeah.
You're probably having a lot of thoughts.
I'm synthesizing it. But I mean, there's a whole wealth of literature on pacing, on timekeeping, on internal metronome. And there's so many accounts as well from the adventure kind of literature of people having to break that enormous goal into tiny steps. One that springs to mind, are you familiar with Touching the Void, Joe Simpson?
Yeah.
So the famous where they cut the rope and he fell down a crevasse and it took him 5 days to crawl out.
Yeah, but I've never gone.
I mean, it's an amazing testament to the spirit of a human being to just keep going, with no end in sight. But it took him about 5 days to come down a Peruvian mountainside.
It's an absolutely
with a shattered leg.
mental story.
Yeah,
do you know this?
No, I don't know it. No, I'd love to see it.
All right, do you want me to recount it quick?
No, go for it.
So basically, him and his climbing partner were on a peak called Sula Grande up in the Peruvian.
It's in the
Andes.
70s, isn't it?
In the 80s,
or the 80s,
maybe late 80s.
But when they don't have all the tech,
right?
They
got an ice axe.
Yeah, they got their ice axes, but they don't have the weather forecasting. They don't have this. I think it's a first ascent as well. So
and it's a amazingly sort of vertical ice sort of pinnacle. And on the way down, they got into some bother. And cut a long story short, he ended up breaking his leg very severely. I think his shin went through his kneecap.
Oh no!
And of course,
horrible.
His Simon Yates, his partner in crime, was luring him down. An amazing achievement in itself to try and help rescue his friend. And it got to the point where he was hanging over a cliff, or the blizzard had come down, and Simon was like basically getting pulled off the mountain because of the weight of Joe Simpson. And in the end, the only thing he could do was cut the rope to basically, because he was like, well, he must be dead. And anyway, there's a whole story to that.
So either he dies or both of us die or something.
Yeah. And the upshot of it is Joe Simpson fell into a crevasse about another 90 feet or however.
With the guy with the broken leg?
With the broken leg, and he was lying in the crevasse, and I think it was a day or so before he managed to extricate himself from that, and he crawled down the mountain. But the point I was coming to is that he specifically talks about the only way to get on, to keep going, is to count, right, I'm going to get 3 meters over there, I'm going to do 10 crawls, and it's just breaking things down. So there's quite a lot of stuff from the adventure literature and also from the psychological literature. If you've got this massive magnitude task, break it into tiny chunks. There's some interesting stuff I won't go into, but to do a dopamine release as well, Microgoals they call it. So tiny things, especially if you're super depressed, cleaning a small part of your room gives you a little bit of a dopamine, which then helps.
Gary.
So there's a micro goals into that. But
So based on what Henk's just shared, can you talk about some of your own experiences and maybe where you can kind of find some common ground, and then and perhaps then go into kind of what's going on?
Sure.
With Henk and just the process. He shared a little bit. Thanks for sharing that. Your personal situation, because it's very unique.
I think
and
it's very linked to all of this for me anyway, and happy to talk about it. I don't think there's any point in shying away from it.
I mean, I won't go into detail on my stuff. I haven't really done any major exploits, but I've progressively gone through from being a very anxious kid, really holding myself back and kind of terrified of doing anything, to kind of progressively building some skills and experience in the mountains, from UK hill walking through to kind of climbing a relatively high altitude up to 6,000 meters in the Andes. I've been to Greenland. I suffered some frostbite out in Greenland, and I can relate.
Say it's not a major exploit. It's pretty cool.
Well, I think the way I sort of encapsulate it is I've always struggled to kind of fit into. I guess I've always thought other people are at a higher level than me, and I've been told not to compare myself to Everest Summiteers or the SAS or whatever. But I aim high, and I always feel that it's imposter syndrome.
Or comparison is the thief of joy, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what I tell my kids all the time, because it's you're on your own journey and you're unique and special. And
that's
valued.
it. And to be honest, when I went to say Greenland, I could relate to what you're saying. What the hell am I doing here? Oh my God, there's a guy who's been up Everest, who skis to the South Pole.
Makes
I'm
you
about
feel
to go
very
off in
small.
the wild with him, like in -30 and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, how will I keep up? What if I burn the tent down with the stove, or just simple the minutiae. Actually, funny enough, you mentioned about clipping things in earlier on, and just the little details sometimes are what you become the most anxious about. And I found over time, I had done a lot of preparation, I'd done a lot of training in the gym, and I was stepping into the next level. And sometimes you kind of, it's the unknown, so you don't know what you'll be like, and you think you're going to be an idiot. But actually, once you settle into it and you realise you have got the skills, your ego isn't, you're brought down to size, and then you just fit in and go along with things, and gradually you build the confidence and the empowerment from that. So I mean, I've done various things like that. I got into the extreme sports community in the last few years. And I kind of took a step back from my own journey and wanted to understand what other people are doing and how they get to where they're going. And I was so in awe of watching these lunatics, for want of a better word, jumping off cliffs. And I ended up, hanging out with them literally on ropes, taking photographs of them, and just trying to get a sense of how do you get into that mentality where the risk is so extreme, but you calm that voice inside. And that's where my kind of research started to segue with that, to the point where I even did a base jump last year, and it was part of the first tandem base jumps ever done in the UK, and that was where I kind of did my first one. But I had to use some of these techniques, relaxation. You talked about breathing a moment ago. That's a big component of the research I do, mindfulness, all that kind of stuff, and had to use these on myself, because I thought, right, I don't know what's going to happen here. No one's really done this before in this position anyway. So for me, it's been a journey from anxiety through to kind of empowerment progressively, to understand what other people are kind of doing to overcome this challenge, this stress and this fear, and then kind of try and put that into practice, and just realize that when you do confront the unknown, you adapt, and all that kind of impetus comes together, and you've got that inner strength comes out. So I can really resonate with.
And you can just manage.
Well, the brain adapts. I mean, our brains have evolved to adapt in extreme situations, and evolution was extreme. And actually, we've lost that connection in a way, which is why things like the Wim Hof method, ultra endurance, people doing all these kind of really tough challenges, were reconnecting with that, ability which is within us to do that. And it's hard, it's traumatic, but it's a positive thing.
You don't really ever get these life or this almost a simulation of life and death in day to day. You don't get it. Whereas, and we get, you're talking about the anxiety, and there's, when you've got all these different factors, and you've got your phone, you've got your emails, you've got your your family, your job, etc., all these things. But actually, if you go into these wild environments, it suddenly becomes, oh, hang on a minute, your hierarchy of needs completely changes, and thinking, I might lose a finger today, I might, or it's just things like that, and so it then strips everything back to what's important. We don't get that in real life, and so to feel it. To feel it is
be in it,
and to be in it is it's an amazing opportunity, and almost like just part of the human condition and the human experience to actually feel, oh, I might be in trouble here.
We were talking earlier before we started recording about actually doing things versus like just being on social media. So even this is really, really informative and helpful for, I think, for a lot of people, even to just listen to this, but then also for them to go out and do it themselves. That's a completely different thing. So I think maybe if we could go back a bit, thank you for sharing about your parents, by the way. It's really powerful. I think we can tell that it's the adventures you went on afterwards have clearly helped you a lot. Perhaps, Dave, if you could dive into a little bit about the brain language, about maybe what, obviously you can't speak on behalf of Henk, but then bringing that to why it would be good for those out there listening that have gone through similar
traumas,
and why going out on and doing these things would help them in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of specialize, if you like, in the brain mechanics. So yes, I'm a psychologist, but I'm also a neuroscientist, and I have this framework that I've been really delving into and researching, and it's all to do with the ruminating self is one way to talk about it. So when we're not engaged in outward focused goals or tasks, we tend to go into ourselves and we activate parts of the brain which are to do with self-referential thought. So things which relate to me, to I, things which might happen to me in the future, things which I've gone through in the past. And we kind of default to that, and it's literally called the default mode. Default mode.
I've never heard of that.
So it's actually, there's a long history in the last 20 years or so where it was kind of identified in brain scanners, and some amazing work being done. And the thing is, it's been found that when people are in anxiety states, high stress states, high, clinical depression, this particular set of brain regions is gone into kind of overdrive. So it's kind of like locked into itself. Now, we do this all the time if we're not focused on something productive, or we're daydreaming, and then inevitably thoughts can turn negative and we get stuck in those ruminating loops. And this is where my research, I'm really interested to probe into things like PTSD, particularly people from like the military, or people who've gone through really traumatic things. And this is where I want to bring more of the adventure side in, because adventure, like you said before, there's almost a controlled stress. I mean, the mountains aren't controlled, but you're voluntarily going there, which means you're exerting control in yourself in chaos. And that's kind of what evolution's about, us being in control of ourselves and going out there. And what I'm really trying to push is the message about is when these default mode areas are kind of locked in, it inhibits our ability to focus on goals. It inhibits our ability to actually externally orientate ourselves to the world, and it literally closes down our perception.
Shuts it all down. It's almost like survival mode, or just you can't deal with it. It's almost going round and round in circles,
and it reduces something I call the bandwidth of perception. So we have less bandwidth to perceive things in the world. So that means we're seeing less opportunity. Our attention is focused in a very narrow and self-restrictive way, and we act less on the world as well.
It's almost like shuttered. Yeah, you shut it right down.
Yeah, I mean, there's research with rock climbing, people on rock climbing walls with high levels of anxiety literally don't reach as far to get the holes which are within their grasp. Your attention narrows down. So the point is, and even aside from adventure, but just in general, recognizing these signs that we're going into ourselves. One way to try and flip out of that is to actually orientate your attention to things in the outside world. You're engaging your spatial perception, so you're actually seeing. It's a bit of a forced thing to try and do it, but knowing that the brain works in this way, you can use that kind of mechanics to your advantage. So part of what I'm saying is about having goals is key, and that's kind of banging the drum about goals and in executive performance and leadership and all that. You need to have goals, or you want to try and create a goal and then head for it and then break that into smaller goals. But basically, adventure adds something to the mix because it's, like I said, it's something we've lost that connection with, but it's within us all. Who doesn't want to be more adventurous, even just in thought and exploration of what's around the world? But by engaging with adventure type challenges, you actually engage the stress system in a positive way. So the stress system normally is kind of reactive. We're looking at emails, we get notifications. It's the dopamine hits. We were talking about this before. And that's a kind of a quick fix, like the junk food or crisps we were talking about before. There's kind of junk food for the brain is doom scrolling through social media.
Yeah, Henk described doom scrolling like a bag of crisps. So it's it's empty, but it
like
feels good.
Empty
And
calories,
gives
no
you
nutritional value, but you can't stop.
And it tastes good, but then you feel afterwards you might feel a bit.
So it's that quick fix, but actually that's not doing us any good. It's putting us in a reactive mode, and again, and I won't go into the whole detail, but the stress system can go into this reactive mode where you're just reacting to the next thing. Your attention's all over the place, and you're also building that default kind of ruminating loop. So adventure, it broadens your perception of what's out there. It puts you in a more what you might call a challenge mindset, which basically means instead of seeing everything as a threat, you see opportunities as a challenge. So
or staying alive.
I mean,
It's
staying
like you're
alive
in the moment.
But you can feel those stress symptoms coming on, the quickening of the breath, the pulse racing, the sweaty palms, and you can start to go into that ruminating kind of mode. But actually, that's the point where you can take a bit of control and go, well, okay, I feel this potential stress, but actually I'm going to see this as a challenge I can overcome. And that actually, interestingly, there is some research which shows that the brain switches its mode when you do that I can as opposed to I can't, and you start to turn off or turn down that default mode. So having these adventure challenges, having that stress, but it's a positive stress to go out and kind of use it at a mechanistic level. It does turn the brain into that kind of positive, goal-directed and purposeful mode.
It probably almost forces new neural pathways as well, because you're in a completely different environment. And the one thing that Henk touched on, which I thought was interesting, even though it's chaos on the mountain as you described, you had intention to put yourself there. It's going to be tough, and like you said, you kept reminding yourself that this is why I did it. And it's almost like you put yourself in these situations where everything's new. You're fatigued, you're exhausted, and you also, it's life or death decisions. You don't want to slip off the mountain, and so you're completely in the present. You have no choice but to ruminate. On these neuroses that keep going round and round. It's almost like you're forcing yourself to try new things. And then another thing that we've been thinking about a lot lately is when you put yourself into adversity, you grow, and then your capacity increases. It's almost like blowing up a balloon, isn't it? It's like that. Exactly. You're intentionally filled in that, and then the balloon,
I think as well, on top of that, is that with adventure, it seems as though you know, you can go and do other things, but it seems like that it's to do that thing. But whereas with adventure, it's more about just being there, like being on the journey. It's not about so that you can come back and say I climbed Amadablan. It was for you to be, you know, go through that journey. And
So you touched on something, James, saying the word present, and I think that was something I definitely felt. And actually, and to your point about the journey as well, I definitely signed up to do it with the intention of getting the achievement. But
Okay.
the real journey.
but but actually, when we got to base camp, we'd had a 10-day trek, and that was amazing. It was just incredible just to be there and just to be away from everything. And you were talking, I don't know what the phrase was, but when you were saying it, I heard brain fog in my head. This narrow focus, closing in, because I think probably for the last year, I've definitely had that. I've not been able to, since my mum passed, I've really struggled with focusing on pushing life kind of forward with I guess normal things. And so, and I don't know if that came about because before she died, I spent 2 months, I stopped work for 2 months and looked after her 24/7, and literally right up until the end. I think she went into a hospice and then died the next day or something. So that was a very stressful. There probably were some PTSD symptoms attached to that, and that meant that the following year was this last year has been very, very tough from that bereavement, because dealing with the probate and everything, it's all very tough. So but these challenges and adventures, they have created a focus, and they've given purpose, and they've given a sense of presence, being like, I'm in this moment. Nothing else matters. Nothing else is going on. And I would have thought that you think that it's about the placement in the race, or it's about ticking the box of what you did, which you think is going to be important, but actually, to your point, it is the process. It is it is everything. It's everything else. Everything else is the secret sauce. It's the getting satisfaction and enjoyment out of the individual moments.
Because that's what you bring back with you. To then use to tackle all the other things that you needed.
Or when people, so I got back last week, and when people have asked about it, there's the actual summiting is not part of the conversation, really.
You have mentioned it. We just got,
I was up there for 2 minutes, just out of breath.
Yay!
Just get back down.
Took a quick couple of pictures and was like, get me on. But actually, I think in mountaineering, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this as well, there's so much chat around, and rightly so. It's not just getting to the top; it's getting back down.
Yeah, that's most fatalities happen, don't they, on the way down?
Most issues happen on the way down, and I did get to the top and thought, "Done it, cool, this is great." And then you take a few steps on the way down, and you realize I'm still at 6,800 meters with no supplementary oxygen, and because from camp 2 to the summit and then back down to camp 2, it ended up being about 16 hours. And we were talking about this a bit earlier, the food situation. Right. And the guy, you and the team, you got to bring up your food. And Amadablam in particular is a weird one when it comes to water, because it's so steep. There's not all this snow you can melt. It's just rock. On these camps, so the lads bring up, the absolute bare minimum amount of water, for for 3 days. And so for that 16 hours, you wake up at 9 p.m. You have less than a pack of ramen noodles because they split 3 packs amongst 4 people.
Okay.
Nice and nutritious for you.
You set off around 10 p.m. at night, and you go for about maybe 9 hours.
Okay.
You just slog it out in the dark. You can't see anything. You've got no views. It's a bit weird and a bit rough. You can't see anything. You're exhausted. You've had this pack of ramen noodles. You reach into your suit to try and pull out a Snickers bar. It's completely frozen because it's minus 30. You think, oh, I could really do with a swig of water. Right, you have a swig of water. You got a litre with you. That's it. And then you get to the top and you think, right, done it. And then on the way down, the sun's come up. And you think, right, this is, the sun's come out, we've got some, these beautiful views. And then you realise the mountain's heating up. And the cracks, you can hear this as the crevasses start opening up for the day. And the snow and ice, because it was so steep, just starts plummeting on you. And you realise you've got this frozen Snickers in your pocket and you've got an apple. And you've got a... So actually, getting back to Camp 2 was the real win. And it wasn't actually the summit.
Then you can actually eat something, and
we have another pack of ramen noodles.
but you've still only got a litre of water.
And you got some water.
Oh wow.
But it's so it's not, the actual summit is not really it's not really the goal, which is so weird.
It is weird.
If we think about achievement and kind of normal races and things like that, it's crossing that line and there's that point. But actually no, the finish line is this horrible tent on a knife edge with 3 other dudes in there just
It's kind of like everything else in life though, right? There's no real destination. Like you think that you get this thing, you achieve this thing or whatever, but then you're not actually really happy, and it's like the same thing. It's about the journey, right?
Well, I mean, and just on that, I mean, slightly away from the adventure ring, but I think relevant to what you were saying about the PTSD is it's a kind of this a bit of this process of like bereavement and like getting yourself back on track, because after my dad died, I didn't. You obviously get completely. Well, as a family, we were. I mean, it's just horrific. As a period of time, and my mum, bless her, was very, very good at just ensuring we discussed things and we voiced thoughts, because it was also lockdown, so you're just trapped as well. It was all, and because someone said to me, "Oh, why don't you go traveling to Bali?" I was like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. But anyway, so it was the first 6 months was just shock. And then I remember February 21, that was when the PTSD, and I only realized it was PTSD after my therapist we did some therapy, like the specific kind of PTSD therapy, and I'd like looked it up, and then she didn't say PTSD, but then you reverse diagnose yourself with the you see the treatment and then you reverse it. You work out, what have I got? But basically it was this invasive imaging, right? The image of finding my dad and everything just kept coming up.
Because you're all together as a family when it happened.
Yeah, we were all together as a family, and my girlfriend who had basically just met my mum and dad was in the house as well. It was all it was all very weird. But then there is a point to this, by the way, right? But the therapy we did, well, it was actually after that initial 6 months, and you think, oh, okay, maybe everything's maybe I'm going to be back to normal again, and then suddenly you get this invasive imaging which just inhibits everything you do. It just pauses you in your tracks, stops you just being able to do basic normal things without breaking down and having an absolute terrible day. But then the process of that therapy, and this is the point, right, about it being the journey. We did this. It's called EMDR. It's very, very. It doesn't work for everybody, but it worked. It worked for me, and it's which stands for eye movement desensitization reprogramming, I think.
Yeah.
So you go into a sort of dream-like REM state to then try and simulate in a controlled way and dismantle some of the emotion attached to these images. Very powerful. But we did maybe 3 of these sessions, and I was really trying to buy into it. I was really trying to say, I'm gonna go all in on this.
Give it a real
go. And I, you know, really, I believe in all of this stuff. So I was just really kind of going for it. But it was nothing was happening. There was no change, like week after week doing this.
So you have to relive things intentionally.
You have to relive
which
it
is
intentionally.
hard. Yeah. Okay.
And I, even though I really subscribed to it, there was a point where I thought, this is mumbo jumbo. We did this all remotely as well, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really? Okay, that's even harder.
Which is
My
crazy.
goodness.
Yeah, that might.
But anyway, I said, I don't like this. This isn't working. And she said, okay, well, can you promise me we'll just do one more?
Okay.
And we can maybe see where this is going. But I was like, fine, okay, fine. Let go of the expectation. I was like, whatever, okay, we'll just get through this one more session. And then that was the one.
Yeah.
And it never happened again.
That is powerful.
It was just after the session, and then it was like magic. And it was unreal.
Yeah.
But the point is it's like, it's, if you keep trying to like go for the end, you keep trying to like be very like results orientated. I think it's very easy to just like to burn out, run out of steam. And it's the same, you know, to loop it back to endurance and these ultra marathons. If you look at your 250k ultra marathon, you go, you know, that's too much, right? But if you say I'm going to get to that checkpoint, and it you know, and it's that process, being more process driven, and it's something I'm trying to work on, because I think it's a natural tendency to look to the end.
Yeah.
Then that is the secret sauce.
Do you know what? Yeah.
There's so much about that struggle and then the release. They talk of this in the kind of stuff around flow states, you know, this optimal state where it's the struggle, the wrestle, wrestling with the problem, but you're not going to necessarily get to the end of it by only wrestling. It's when you release that, and your kind of unconscious mind seems to just synthesize things, and there's less pressure on you to solve the problem. That's when the kind of transformation.
You see that actually with IVF, don't you? When people try for years and years and years, and they just like they stop, and then they fall pregnant. So it's just kind of I don't know. It's a bit random, but it's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like let go of like. Well, I'm so pleased you shared that, because I was aware you had shared that with me previously, and I think I thought of it earlier, but it wasn't really appropriate to kind of me bringing it up. So thanks for sharing that. I think demonstrating that the mind it's quite malleable and it can change. And I think for those folks out there that are in a point of despair, or they're grieving, you know, if you are intentional, you can, you know, there is ways to kind of create new neural pathways and actually get beyond that. You don't have to go climb a mountain. It might be that you go for a jog in the rain. Something that is, you know, uncomfortable, but it's, you know, for you or take a cold shower, or do something that's just outside your own normal routine.
You know what, James? Like on that, I know
I'm not qualified, by the way, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but just.
But with my own journey, and I know that there's been some really, I'm going to say, Instagrammable highlights, right? With going to picturesque places, but as I was saying, in February 21, that was a period where I didn't want to get out of bed.
It's bleak.
Didn't want to get out of bed. Didn't want to brush my teeth. Didn't want to shower, cook, exercise. Didn't want to do anything. Like really, really low stuff. But I don't know if we pressed record when we said this, but it was the Microgoals.
Yeah.
It's the one thing you can do today. You can make your bed. It's very easy.
Yeah.
I know it's such a cliche thing, but sometimes it doesn't have to be complicated. And that and just one little win, and then and I think when you've been at a really low point,
completely rock bottom.
Yeah, and actually just waking up and washing your hair is an achievement.
Yeah.
You can layer stuff on, and then you can just keep, and then the momentum takes us to where I feel like I've got to with my endurance sports. But that did start with one day in 2021 of just making my bed.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Okay.
It's I know there's been some. I had a sporting background, but we've got to realize it was really, really. It was really, really bad, and I probably didn't let that many people know.
I had no idea
how
that you were
bad it
going.
was.
Yeah, I mean,
it's part of being a survivor of
right.
suicide.
Yeah, you had to go through it though. No one could have helped you.
Yeah.
Could they? I mean, I guess you just the buck stops with you. You got to help yourself, and but
you do.
to even recognise that though, and actually that's a really good message as well. That it's the tiny little things. It's just that one thing. You made your bed, or just wash your hair, or just and just build on that.
And
it's really powerful.
And then also not putting so much pressure on yourself to be perfect overnight. There's I mean, again, you can say like, look, you've like run long distances, you've climbed these mountains, right? It's all very intense stuff, but there were still, again, when I was in healing mode, going for a 1,500 meter run, being like, oh, I'm going to go out for a 10K, and then literally 6 minutes and going,
you're done.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm completely cooked. I'm like just feeling awful. So it's not all. You don't have to say, oh well, I need to be doing that, therefore I'm going to do it tomorrow. It's there's a lot of build up, and there's a lot of small things which you have to just try and look after, and again remember that you're running your own race. And it's taken a while to realize, but because it's easy to get caught up in the rat race. I live in London, I work in professional services. It's quite kind of corporate, competitive, and you then realize actually no one else I know is an orphan, if we're going to use that phrase, at in their mid-20s. So maybe I need to not think I need to be keeping up.
And I think it's not even just people that go through tragedy. It's like even just people just in general nowadays. Like so many people find it so hard to get out of bed, just brush your teeth and just have a shower, clean, make sure your house is clean. And I think maybe perhaps it's like a lot to do with the narrow view thing as well, because especially young people, when you're spending time online, then that narrow focus and then creates that echo chamber, right? That when you start when you have these thoughts, I'm not good enough to even do that, I'm too tired, I'm too depressed, and it's like you're only in your own head, and you're only hearing your own thoughts and voices. You're not going out and doing these things and interacting with people, and
and you're not realizing that other people are in the same boat. We're all islands, but that's why connecting with others, sharing stories, and going, oh, you know what, you think that way as well. Oh, well, actually, everyone thinks that way. That's the way our brains are programmed. If we don't give it positive, purposeful kind of goals, we will just go into that default setting. But I just wanted to pick on a personal point, because actually a lot of what you said I've resonated with. My father died when I was 21 very suddenly. He went to the gym and didn't come back.
Sorry.
And it's a long time ago, but that hit me very hard in ways I didn't appreciate at the time. And I remember the funeral, I was away with a mix. I just went in my bedroom. I didn't really speak to anyone. A week later, I was up a mountain in Glencoe, And you know what? I had a very, very dark period. I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I was in a very dark state of mind. But I sought solace in the mountains. And it did something partly to do with the community people who I was around. And it was kind of my support network, which I wasn't necessarily, I was putting on the brave face, but getting out in the mountains. I'm not saying it was immediately therapeutic. It wasn't. I remember going up that mountain and my thoughts were just in a really dark place, and the sufferance of being in the hills and all that. But there's something about putting yourself out there, working through that effortfully. Then you get that release and the transformation for having done that. You know, there's no quick fix or no easy fix to anything. But yeah, getting yourself out there, doing positive things in nature and with the surroundings of a like-minded community who are there for you.
Yeah.
You know, it's very
there's an anecdote actually just on that exact point about community, because when I was in Sweden, and you got to imagine this. So it's 4 a.m. We're in a cabin with I'm in a cabin with these 3 other guys, and we responsible for keeping the fire going in the night because it's minus 25 or 20 or whatever it is. There's a big gale storm kind of going on. It's just crazy. Imagine this. It's all quite poetic. I had not sorted the fire out up until this point in any of the cabins.
Oh, right.
Everyone else was doing it. I was like, I'm the baby. It's like, I've got these, like, there was this dude from the Paras. There was another guy from the Irish Guards. There was all these. I was like, do you know what? I think they're comfortable just doing it. But I woke up at 4 a.m. and it was freezing. And I thought, this is going to be my moment where I step up. And part of the kit list, we had to have these... we had to have like tampons because you can like unravel them and they're really flammable. So I'm just there like messing around, like just not like losing a match, losing another match gone. I was like, ugh. Really trying to get this going, and then I just hear this little voice, just like Henk, do you need some help? Do you need some help now? I was like, no, you go back to bed. You need your rest. And they were like, we're gonna get up, right? And then the three of them got up, and then we got this fire going, and then we thought, oh, well, we're up now. We might as well just get some of our kit together. Yeah. And I don't know what happened, but for some reason we then ended up just having like the most amazing deep conversation. I told them about my dad, and I told them about my mum, and then they told things that had happened to them, and we had this. We met 3 days before, and there were just these 4, and I'm going to say men because I think typically it's, men are maybe a little bit more shut off for talking about this kind of stuff. But I just thought this is one of those moments. This is one of those beautiful moments where we've come together in joint stressful situation, a mutual stressful situation, and it's broken down all the barriers. We've all come from different parts of the world, different backgrounds. None of us were the same.
There's a reason why these matches weren't lighting as well, because if they had lit,
some sort of
it wouldn't have been different.
It's
like
universe. But then actually connecting and feeling like there's you've got this community, and like I think it's the mountains, it's the outdoors, it's the wilderness. It's just
it's going back to like the roots of who we are, like where we came from, right? That's the most healing thing, really. And I think it's like the most important thing nowadays, because we're all boxed in. So I've learned something recently that I didn't know before about 90-degree angles. Like it's just not, you never find it in nature. If you do, it's like the most tiniest thing that is just, you don't notice it. And it's so off, it's subconsciously off-putting for us.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's why
you knew that. Were you aware of that?
Well, sorry to interject, but there is a whole literature around the composition of the surroundings at a mathematical level. I'm not a mathematician. I'll try and summarize it simply, but basically, there's a measure of complexity in the world, in the visual environment, and it's actually measured by something called a D measure. And apparently there's an optimal measure for aesthetic and kind of beauty and you know how easy it is to perceive things, and it's between 1.3 and 1.5.
Okay.
Don't ask me how it's actually measured, but basically it's to do with fractals.
Yeah.
Now fractals are these repeating patterns at scale, whether it's in branches or snowflakes or whatever, and you know from the very small to the very big. And in nature, there is more fractal complexity, apparently, from things like the interplay of light and shade, or clouds moving across the sky, or branches in the wind, or the sea undulating, compared to, like you said, in indoor or urban environments where there's a lot more angles, there's a lot less complexity in that sense, and our vision is restricted, you know, to how far away the next building is or whatever, or by ordered kind of linear sort of streets and whatever. Whereas in nature, our kind of, they call it soft attention skills, it's a softer focus where we can see into the distance. We've evolved to look into the distance, to see opportunity, and to get that impetus to go further and explore further, you know. So maybe that's something to do with the bigger goals, the adventurous goals in nature.
Okay, and the healing,
exactly,
of that.
Absolutely.
So I want to share just a story about, it's the most interesting story about grief, how somebody dealt with grief. I'm not sure whether I shared it with you, Henk, when we met for lunch, but it was an elderly, he was a rabbi actually, Jewish guy, who I met on a bus. Have I told you this story?
No.
Okay, so I was probably in my mid-20s, and it was kind of a night bus from Portland, from Boston to Portland, Maine, where I used to live in the US. And he offered me, I was really hungry, but I didn't say anything. But this old man, he offered me an apple, and I felt a bit funny taking it. And in the end, you know, I accepted it graciously, and then he gave me half a cheese sandwich. And anyway, I got chatting to him. Anyway, he told me the story of his wife, and she had gone through. She was a Holocaust survivor, and obviously all her family had been murdered. But she didn't smile for a decade. But during that time, she wove a tapestry. It took her 10 years to weave this tapestry. So she basically wove all of her grief and pain into this beautiful piece of art. Took her 10 years. And then when she'd finished it, she was free. And that's how she dealt with it. And it was just, I think it gives me shivers even just retelling it. I think it just took that work and intention, and but she wove all of that into all that pain, and created something beautiful out of it. And then she was free, and then she smiled. She hadn't smiled in that 10 years, but then she smiled again. But that was 10 years. Yeah, and it's I haven't told it much, but it was just really impactful to me. But he's such a kind man. I don't know I can't remember. I don't know his name, and he was going to give some talk in Portland. But
there's something quite poetic about the stranger telling that story to another stranger as well, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, that's
I don't know. It's just why, if you want to get all philosophical, why was he there? Why were you there at that moment? And he gave you the apple, and he told.
And now I'm telling the world. Yeah, it's I guess it's crazy, isn't it? But yeah, that kindness, and but even accepting it felt awkward, because it's like, who's this? You know, like I was always told not to have, you know, if a stranger offers you sweets, you know, you don't. It was almost like this childhood tape that so I shouldn't be accepting something from this person, and I'm not hungry, you know. But actually, I did accept it, and it was delicious.
I remember I was in a little shuttle bus, a minibus thing in Bolivia. A long story short, I'd been on a mountaineering trip, and my friend had come down with almost an edema. Actually, I had to go back. I'd come down with a bad toe from a previous frostbite injury. So I got on this, I flew one way to some city in the middle of nowhere, and I just went on this kind of pilgrimage or whatever. I got in this tiny little minibus. It was kind of like a shared ride where you just give the chap a few whatever pesos, and off you go. And it was about 200 miles, and it was boiling in there. There weren't chickens, but there was all manner of things. It was just a local thing. And I remember I was so hot, and this old fella next to me, he insisted on shoving this blanket over me to share warmth. Like, oh God, I'm so hot, I'm about to pass out. But I just suffered through it. But the kindness of strangers, and especially when you travel as well into less developed parts of the world where there's just so much of that camaraderie, and I think that's what's great about traveling as well, because you reconnect with the communities which are giving and whatever. But something about going on adventures with other people, and then sometimes you don't know each other, and then you can share more, and that it just flows out because of the common bond.
There must be something in the human psyche about treating traveling strangers in these kind of contexts.
When we were nomads, all those thousands of years ago.
There's some nomadic instinct somewhere. It was when I was a teenager. My girlfriend at the time and I, it was very silly, but we because I think I was 18, she was 17, and I'd said to her, I was like, oh, what do you plan on doing for the rest of the summer holiday? And she said, oh, I would like to cycle to Paris. And I said, well, I'd like to do that as well. That might be fun. But I'm starting a new job in 4 days. So we don't really have that much time. And she was like, so we just go tomorrow? So it was like 3 PM. We were like, let's just go tomorrow. I said to my mum and dad, I was like, oh, by the way, I'm going to be off for a couple of days. They were like, oh, yeah, fine. Okay, whatever. They're just like never really worried. And and then just got our stuff and cycled down to like the worst route ever. It was just, I'm not going to go into details, but it was just chaos from start to finish. Like all navigation issues. Like we cycled through London. That was the first time we'd ever done that. It was mental. And anyway, we were in when we were in France. Eventually, we'd had it was just a nightmare journey. And I remember we pull into this town, and they were like, and the guidebook, because we were following a guidebook. Okay. As well, we didn't have
no hotel,
no GPS or anything. We were just following like, where is this hotel? And I remember it was like 10 PM at night, just like knocking on doors in this random French town, and didn't speak a lick of French really. Wow. And then this geezer came out. This guy came out and said, and just starts like ratting off, and I showed him the address, and he was like, yeah. Shuts the door, and I was like, what's going to happen next? And then his garage door opens. He's on this rusty old bike, and he just goes like, allez, right? And just escorts us to the hotel. And just this random stranger, which I thought was great. And then the next day, my back wheel exploded, and this guy just stops, he's like starts shouting, and then he basically fixes my whole bike for me just on the side of the road. So there's some, I don't know what it is,
and I'm sure you'll pay it forward someday if you haven't already. I'm sure you'll pay it forward at some point. With all your future travels, adventures.
It's connection, right?
Human connection.
And I think that's what we need more of. It's like the world moving in a direction where we're going against that, when really this whole conversation just proves that like it's connection with other people, but even also just connection with nature. So that is like the most healing thing, and that's what brings us back to our roots, and then you pay it forward afterwards as well.
But have no obligation to, though. You don't do it for but it's a nice thing to do. I mean, I guess you three hadn't met before from this morning. And it goes to show you can actually have deep and meaningful, valuable conversations with complete strangers. I think the point that Neil made, you never know, Neil Lawton, never know who you're sitting next to on the train. I actually experimented with it yesterday and had a really good conversation.
Did you just ask someone next to you?
With a professor, she was.
So sorry, who are you?
Can you just give me a quick
rundown? Just also get to Great Portland Street.
So who are you and why are you here?
But everyone's got a story, haven't they? Unless you reach out and ask, talk. Because otherwise people are kind of defensive, aren't they? Especially in Britain, maybe.
You can learn something from anyone, can't you? There's always something valuable that everyone has, doesn't matter who they are. I think we're kind of probably running out of, we're kind of getting to the end of our conversation, but it's been really, really insightful, really good. Is there any bit of wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners with, Dave? Or anything that or a question that you haven't been asked that you would like to talk about? Because I mean, we don't have to do a hard stop, so we've got a bit of time. But is there anything that you would like to talk about? Share with our listeners that they need to hear, basically.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we've touched on things like community, and to be honest, I've done a few podcasts now, and it's while having these conversations, I've kind of really picked up on the fact of although I'm looking at the brain and the individual and what makes certain individuals tick, actually it's that sense of community and talking about it and understanding when you find your tribe, whether it's three strangers who you've just met on a mountainside or whatever, it's that communal thing. And what I did want to mention actually is I've worked quite a lot in the last few years with various charities which use adventure as a kind of therapeutic and facilitatory tool, from charities which take people just walking in the hills and the mountains and have chats about, because when we're walking side by side and we're with new strangers in these environments, it stimulates discussion, all the way through to charities which take people who've had previous substance abuse issues, homelessness, on things like rock climbing, paddle sports, and also sailing related charities which I've worked with, where we've been on tall ships, voyages from central London through to Ireland and Liverpool, with kids who basically come from very not good backgrounds, and the bonding in adversity there, where you start off with these inner city kids from Liverpool who are kind of want to scrap with everyone and I'm gonna knock it out, and then they go through the seasickness and get out out the Medway and beyond, and then I tell you what, that bonds people together, and by the end of those weeks there's transformation. So it's this whole cycle of embracing that challenge amongst other people in a group, and recognizing that struggle is part of human nature, and we don't do enough struggling we struggle in our own lives on things which are thrust upon us, but going out and finding that sense of community with others and accepting the challenge and embracing it, and it's such a positive thing, and no one's an island, I guess, is the message I'm trying to convey.
And maybe accept help if it's offered, or ask for help. I mean, both those two things they take courage. It takes courage to accept something from somebody. It takes courage to ask for help when you like Henk with his fire lighting, but
there's organisations out there, and
I can do it. You trying to light a tampon, you said? Did you actually say that?
That is exactly what happened.
But just one final thing on that is I'm trying to push my research into the area of things like veterans with PTSD.
Okay.
Because there's proven stuff in the past that getting people with PTSD, certainly from an ex-military point of view, in adventure situations, it can give them that kind of controlled stressor to empower them and try and address those internal symptoms that they're going through. So that's where I'm pushing my research at the moment.
Okay. And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
My website is CognitivExplorer.
Yeah, you mentioned that. That's great. We'll stick that on a
.co.uk.
.co.uk. It's a funny spelling, but
Cognitive Explorer. I like it.
Cognitive Explorer. The synthesis of exploration and the mind and psychology and well-being and all that.
Obviously, I can't speak for Henk, but if you ever want to strap something on my head when I'm on my adventure motorcycle, doing high-speed bends and stuff, what's going on in my brain? I don't know.
And there's also a conference coming up in a couple of weeks called Adventure Mind.
Okay.
Adventure
yes,
Mind.
I mentioned that.
Yeah, that might be. Yeah, well, that might be a good. We could go along to that. Maybe.
Adventure Mind.
Where is it in Liverpool?
It's in Doncaster.
Doncaster. Okay, we won't be going. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
27th, 28th, and it's bringing together all kind of practitioners, outdoor people, outdoor therapists, outdoor practitioners, and research to show the benefits of adventure for well-being. And it's quite a movement actually that's building.
That's fantastic.
So
Yeah, that was a very tasteless joke. I mean, I've never been to Doncaster, so I have no idea.
I've only been once before.
Oh, you have? Okay.
For the same conference.
Cool. So Henk, thanks, Dave. That's really good. That's a really good summary. Is there anything that you would like to impart our listeners with, folks out there that might be
Any final points?
Well, maybe
Or
talk
thoughts?
to yourself. I mean, any wisdom or anything that you've learned from your experiences in the last few years that you would want to other people to.
Yeah, I think the big thing is, if you've gone through any adversity or trauma, and you feel like there's no way out of it necessarily, that being overwhelmed is part of the process. Everybody will have it. Taking on big challenges is overwhelming. Recovering from bereavement or trauma is overwhelming. You have to take those little tiny steps. And you know, my mum had a phrase: "You only get better by doing." There's no way of getting better, but just actually doing the thing. And so I think embracing fear, embracing uncertainty is part of growth. That's my parting point.
No, it's good. It's really powerful. Did you want to add anything, Xander?
No.
Good.
Yeah, where can we find you if you want to be found?
Yeah, do you want to be found?
If I want
Up a mountain trying to line a sound.
I'm a man who cannot be found. No.
This guy's on a mission.
I post a bit of stuff on Instagram. That's at Henk Nation. Long story about where that handle came from.
We all got this.
For another time, but yeah, HENK Nation.
Cool.
That's my Instagram.
And actually, I have to ask one question. Thanks, Henk. That's brilliant. Henk Nation. Sorry, my crazy brain. Why? How did you get the name Crazy Dave? Because you didn't really. I mean, we got to know, haven't we? What was it? Was it one thing?
Or an accumulation?
Yeah, what is it?
Accumulation of life
Or it
events
was
and
dangerous
I don't know. It's
things.
probably something to do with the pub or something.
Okay.
At uni or something. I don't know.
But
No, I mean,
Big balls.
I've always gone off path.
Okay.
You know, whenever I used to go up mountains, I'd be like scrambling off up something. And everyone's
Path
like,
less
"Oh, why?"
travelled.
Or if I've led people up mountains, not that I do this in a mountain leader context now, but I like to take them off the path. And there's a kind of metaphor.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
nice. I like it.
So it's maybe leading them up the garden path. I don't know. But yeah, no, I just embrace the craziness that people get up to, and you know, why fit yourself in a box
yeah.
when you can expand your horizons and just try new things and put yourself out there on the edge and see what happens. I mean, that's what life's about.
So is there a book out there, or is there a book coming, or because
Yes,
I
yes.
can sense a book.
Yeah.
I'd love to read it.
People have been telling me for decades to write a book, and I finally this year decided to write a book.
Okay.
And it was meant to be about kind of extreme sports, adventure, and mental health, and the science. And it started off there, and it's become an autobiography. And actually, that's been a fascinating process, writing
I
that.
bet.
Okay.
And uncovering, all right, that happened, and then that went to this, and you know, I suppose I have done some quite interesting things. I tend to talk myself down, but it's amazing how many helicopter rescues crop up.
He's kept very quiet, hasn't he, on this podcast?
No, so
Maybe that's where Dangerous Dave comes
well, that's
from.
it. I suppose I like to, especially in this, I'm here to talk about the mind and the brain, not talk about what I've done. You know, you've done loads of stuff. So, but actually, the book kind of goes into that. So I'm nearly finished. It's going to be a mammoth editing job, and that's going to be like climbing a mountain. The sufferance, I don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so there is a book on it.
So perhaps we can catch up with you in a couple of years' time, and see where you're at, and and if there's any other interesting people that.
Sure.
In fact, I was going to ask you: is there anyone that we should interview?
I'll have
next.
a think.
Okay.
Let you know.
Okay. Or anyone that and that same goes to you. If there's anyone that you really want to speak to, or if you know anyone we should interview, then we can either try and get them on, or because we'd like to grow the Rocket Pod network as far as if we can get referrals from our guests, then it's almost like it will grow and everyone's going to be connected, and then we can kind of get a vibrant community. So
I have met some windswept and interesting people. In my travels, so maybe I can have a think.
Give a think. Brilliant.
Yeah, make some
I
suggestions.
can't think of one person offhand, but I shall tell you off air that moved the idea.
Okay, brilliant. Excellent. We'll look forward to that. Well, thanks again. Thanks
Yeah,
you
pleasure.
both.
Thank you,
It's
guys.
really, and thanks you for just sharing from the heart. It's really, that's
No,
really
absolute
powerful,
pleasure.
really powerful stuff.
Thank you for having us on.
And thanks, Dave, for
Absolutely.
Yeah,
responding to my.
No problem.
It's like, who is this guy? He's like,
Yeah. Well, it's fortunate. This dovetails a little segue here, but I'm actually going to Dorchester this evening to the British Photography Awards
Cool.
because I've been shortlisted for a picture I took a couple of years ago.
Wow.
on Ben
Again,
Nevis.
kept that quiet.
Is that the
People
base
jumping
jumping?
off-
Is that the base
people
jumping?
off Ben Nevis?
Fantastic.
And things have kind of the last few years have been a bit of a roller coaster from not having any profile to suddenly I'm sort
Good.
of getting somewhere. So
Good. We could do little building block, a rocket pod.
you never know.
Cool. Excellent. Well, I hope you win. Brilliant. Or
Taking
Fingers
part
crossed.
that counts.
It's about the
not the
journey.
summer.
It's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not. It's
and
the
people who get
process.
along the way.
Brilliant.
Cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Rocket Pod with Dave and Henk. When you get a moment, we'd love it if you could jump over to whatever platform you're on and leave a quick review. We love your messages. It helps guide us and create more great stories or interview more great people to help you on your journey.
Yeah, I think it was nice to speak to someone about their thoughts and experiences, but then also have someone else there who could, go into a little bit more explanation on the scientific side and just how it actually all really works.
Henk shared some very personal things about his journey with grief, losing his parents, and using extreme sports as a way to kind of just deal with that and putting his energies and emotions into that to help him deal with it. By the same token, I think another key takeaway that came from Dave was, base jumpers, generally don't jump when they're feeling blue. So I think it's all about managing your emotions, getting out there in the world though, really working, being very intentional and working through your emotions, and then come out the other side and feel stronger and better for the experience. So I think we can all benefit from doing more adventure. We don't have to be dealing with any big life events, but I think it's just really good for the spirit, body and mind.
Definitely, yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it was really inspiring actually. Really loved it, and
Yeah.
I've still got so many questions for Dave. We only scratched the surface.
Yeah,
I know
literally.
Dave was
So let us know if you want him to come back on. I think it's nice. It's a nice follow up even from the interview with Neil, if you guys remember. I think it's just the overall point is the importance of going outside, especially if you're going through a really hard time. I think being out in nature, that really helps a lot, but especially if you can do it with some good friends and some good company, that makes the experience even better. So
Yeah, it does. And actually, even Dave mentioned that he had some dark. When he first started climbing, he was in some pretty dark places, but it really helped get him through that. And we did talk on the interview, but Henk is my second cousin once removed, so it was great having him on, and he's they're both great sports. So
Cool.
have a great week ahead, everybody.
yeah, and remember to subscribe, guys. Follow us online so you never miss anything.
See you next time. Bye bye.